Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Decipher podcast. I'm Dennis Fisher. I'm here with my old friend, Gary McGraw, to talk about data feudalism. How's it going, Gary?
I'm a little worried about being your old friend, Dennis.
Well, we've known each
I
other
mean, I mean,
for about 25 years. Yeah, a very long time. I didn't mean
yeah,
you were old. I meant we've been friends a long time.
the English is so ambiguous. That's the thing about LLMs that's surprising is it can do it anyway, sort of.
That was an intentional double entendre, so we'll just leave it there.
There you go.
Um,
All right.
so, for folks that don't know, Gary is a longtime software security researcher and expert, and has written most of the books on that topic that matter. And
They're back there on the wall if you can see it.
yep. Um, and recently, he retired a few years ago, or tried to, and then decided to, for whatever reason, get into machine learning and AI as a retirement project. Now he's unretired, so been doing a lot of work on that kind of stuff, like security and privacy, uh, sort of implications of AI and ML. So, um, Gary, you and Dan Gear and Robert Figueroa, or I'm sorry, not Robert Figueroa.
Harold,
Thank you.
Harold.
Um,
Yeah.
just published a piece on data feudalism, which is a topic or a concept that you and I have talked about before. I think you talked about it with Lindsay on the AI webinar a few weeks ago. Um,
Yeah, and actually, you wrote something in one of the pieces you wrote, I believe, that was quite good about that when we launched our LLM study in January.
yeah.
Um, and in fact, my conversations with you and others led to the data feudalism piece because we felt like we needed to flesh that idea out. And it was really fun to do it with Dan Gear. Although, just between you and me and all the people listening, writing for lawfare is a pain in the wazoo.
All the editors and fact checkers and things like that. Yeah.
Well, we wrote it from the point of view of technologists and computer scientists, which all three of us are the authors. And we said stuff like, we computer scientists, and they were like, you need to change that to something different. And we're like, but we are computer scientists.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Why was
It's neither here nor there. It came out fine in the end. We're happy
it
with
did.
it, but it,
It
it took
did.
some it took some teeth pulling to get it where it is now.
It is funny to me that you and Dan, two severely overeducated farmers, are now writing AI and machine learning pieces.
Did you know that for a while, Dennis, Dan and I were the only two computer security guys who raised pigs?
This makes perfect sense to me. I didn't know that, but it checks out.
We
Yeah.
and it was at the same time Dan had his pigs in North Carolina on the Tennessee border, and I think he's in North Carolina, and maybe it's Tennessee, but it's the border there where I grew up basically, and
Yeah.
I had mine in Virginia, and so we would talk about all sorts of things. We had once a huge philosophical debate about whether buffer overflows were a design problem or a bug, and we almost we were fighting about it like crazy in Palo Alto in person. It was really quite fun. Um, but then we realized that we both had pigs, so we just let it all go behind us.
Let's just talk about livestock instead of buffer overflows. It's more fun.
Exactly. Well, I mean, his point was interesting. He was like, if the big Indian architecture didn't exist, the buffer wouldn't grow the wrong direction, and there wouldn't be such a thing. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But in C, that's the way the architecture is structured. It's a bug to use the buffer wrong. And so it was a very interesting conversation. And that kind of tells you my roots. That was
Yeah.
back in, gosh, must have been 1999, 2000, something like that.
Yeah.
So
Quite a
I've
long
known
time.
you for a long time, and I've known Dan for a long time. And I think the work we're doing now in machine learning security is once again kind of pointing out some pretty obvious things that we should all think more about and do something about.
Gary, there was a piece that came out, I believe it was in Nature, maybe this week or last, about part of that problem you just described, the recursive pollution, and how people are worried that these models are going to collapse in on themselves because they're just eating the same crap that they they output. Essentially, I don't recall exactly who wrote it, but it has a lot to do with what you folks have been writing about and studying too.
Yeah, it was an article written by a lot of really good people, Ilya Shumilov and Ross Anderson and Papernot, Nicholas Papernot, and some others. And in fact, we cited that in our LLM work when it was an archive paper. It got
Okay.
submitted in 2023, and it just got published last week in Nature. It's quite a good paper. They
Jeez.
call what we call recursive pollution. They call it model collapse, but I think that recursive pollution is a little bit more obvious to outsiders that are not machine learning people.
So the recursive pollution problem, where these models are essentially eating all the crap that they put out, or that other models put out, what are the ways that we can address that? We meaning people that have some control over it.
Yeah, I mean, right now the way to address it is to say, if you get something off the internet that's made after 2021, maybe you shouldn't trust it. That's the fair
Fair enough.
enough. But actually, we have to keep producing data, because if we don't keep producing data faster like we've been the whole time, we're definitely going to run out of data. In fact, some people think we're going to run out of data somewhere between 2026 and 2032 at current rates without the recursive pollution problem. So I would say this: recursive pollution is an important enough issue that when you have a foundation model trained on the whole internet, you have to think about what you're going to use it to do. Is it okay if it's wrong every once in a while? Is it being used in a life critical situation? That's probably a bad idea. Is it
Yeah.
being used in a mission critical situation for your enterprise? Well, maybe that's a bad idea too. But if you put guardrails around this technology, realizing that sometimes it's wrong because the data set wasn't perfectly clean, then you can use the technology properly. I remain bullish on machine learning and AI. I think we need to use this technology, but I also think we need to understand it and do risk management appropriately as we put it to use.
Yeah, which is always the problem when there's a new technology, as you well know. People get very excited. They start using it for everything under the sun, without any of those guardrails and without thinking about the inherent risks or emerging risks that come from a new technology. And then bad shit happens, and people are like, why did bad shit happen? You're like, well, because there's no rules. I don't know.
Well, I was asked, but the question is a really good one, Dennis. So, what do you do about recursive pollution? The answer has to be, unless you're Google or Meta or somebody with $100 million to spend building your own LLM, you need to be aware of the problem, and you need to take that to the powers that be and say, hey, here's how this tech really works. Here's what's going on with these massive data piles. Here's why they're wrong sometimes. They don't hallucinate in a cutesy wootsy little hippie deadhead way. They're just freaking wrong. And if you don't mind having a thing that's occasionally wrong in your application, then you can use the tech and it'll be very powerful. But just keep an eye on it, because sometimes it's just going to be wrong as heck. Like,
Yeah.
some of these crazy coots in the United States that think that they should control us with their terrible laws.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay for it to be wrong if you're asking for a lasagna recipe or something, but
Not if it
as
tells
you
you to,
said, if you're
not if it tells you to put strychnine in there and you do it.
yes, or if it tells you to use no bake noodles, don't do that. But if you're yeah, if you're using it for, as you said, some sort of life critical or mission critical, whatever those definitions are, function, then the error rate needs to be extremely small.
Well,
And
then you can it can still make errors, but you got to keep an eye on it, and you got to go, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't think so. Now, the problem with LLMs is that we have the Eliza effect. People just want to believe that these things understand and that they're intelligent. These
right,
things do not understand, and they're not intelligent. What they are is, auto associative recursive generators that predict words. So they take in a pile of words and they predict what the next words would be that would sort of make everything cool and hunky dory. And so
Yeah.
if you use the technology properly, it's just astoundingly powerful. You can do great things, and really changes the notion of user interface a whole lot. We're going to make great strides because of this tech, but we cannot treat it as if it really understands. We got to check its work. We got to treat it like somebody who occasionally just goes haywire and lies, and
Right.
we'll build our systems around that. And you can build systems around that. Sometimes sensors fail, sometimes things are wrong. Believe it or not, the internet has a good capability of keeping on going, even though there are people that are wrong on it every day.
Most people, in fact. Um, you mentioned earlier, Gary, the idea of maybe some more focused LLMs. Something that's got a stricter purpose or something like that. Do you think that is something we're going to see in the next few years?
I do. And what I mean by that is that there are big enough data sets to take advantage of generalizing over the statistics, um, but they're also clean. And in some sense, medical diagnosis has a lot of really good data for this. And so we see some things in the medical subdomain that are really, really good. And then there are formal systems where we see great progress in AI. Like, remember AlphaGo that we were all talking about 5 years
Mhm.
ago? That still
Yeah.
exists. I mean, we've made a lot of progress in the field as a whole. Only we just seem to be, slightly overeager to pretend that LLMs are um, general AI, which they're not.
Yeah.
They're just a great step forward and very remarkably interesting, and so we just need to use them with care, like everything else.
Yeah. All right. Well, Gary, thanks so much for your time as always, man. It's great to hear from you. It's great to see you. And for folks that haven't read it yet, go read this paper in Lawfare. I'll drop a link in the show notes so people can find it. It's really good, as you would think. But thanks as always, buddy.